Hey Alpha fam, welcome back to another episode of Alpha Commission. Today on Alpha Commission, I just want to go over the kind of rebound pump that we're having on the charts. It didn't really last that long. I actually came on here to warn about a fake out because I do see the possibility of continuation to the downside, and I want to just explore that. So let's go ahead and just jump into the charts. And what we can see here is, of course, on the daily, we are underneath our 10 EMA, which is not a good thing. We don't want to close in that type of a position. So we are pretty much being rejected from our EMAs. And you can see when that happens, it's usually not a good thing to be under the 10 on the daily. It's just not an enviable position, let's put it that way, okay? Jumping over to the 24-hour exchanges, that was the CME. You can see we do have that little pump on the charts. We got all the way up to approximately 29,400-ish, right? Somewhere thereabouts. And at this time, it does kind of look like we're just testing the underside of this range that we had been printing for the last week. Nothing too special. And the reason I wanted to suggest that this is a possibility for a fake out, even though we do see Bitcoin holding pretty well, is that if we jump over to stocks, which is really where the action is right now, we can see that stocks are just continuing to plunge. And if I can remove, let's see, let's get rid of the drawings. Let's see, if we can just go ahead and take a look at where we are here, we can see that the MACD is, threatening to cross negatively to the downside. And usually when that cross happens, the move is locked in, right? Whenever you have this kind of a grayish area, just a little bit of faded from the color, it maybe is a fake out move. Sometimes it's not very committed. But typically, when you have the cross, it's very committed. So we're approaching that type of crossover. And, the NAS 100, of course, is my index of choice for following in order to see a parallel in cryptocurrency. But if we take a look at the other indices, you can also see that some of them, like the Dow Jones here, are actually crossed over already. Russell threatening, the SPY is threatening. All of these indices are looking, disturbingly close to crossing over. And it's the Dow Jones which is suggesting to me that this might actually go through, and hence the warning that I'm giving you guys. Because if this thing does end up just continuing to fall tomorrow, opening up negative, then most likely crypto will go with it. Now, of course, you can imagine that on Bitcoin there would be some type of, reaction to such a harsh drop. Even though we did have these levels of support below us. In fact, this kind of local high right here that we put in over the last week, this was kind of a blessing because we could fall down to our local low, right, that we had put in the week before. And so we fell to support. You see the same thing on stocks. They effectively fell to support, right? Their previous low. They're kind of like a higher time frame low. And so this isn't, you know, this shape, even though it looks quite different than crypto and Bitcoin, it actually is pretty much the same move. But the difference being that it's threatening to continue to the downside now, whereas previously, for the last week, we had been suggesting that there was a good chance for it to continue to the upside. And we seem to have lost that momentum, right? You can see we're also entering the bearish control zone on the RSI down here. And of course, similarly on the Stokes, right? Now, being on the daily, let's go ahead and jump over to Bitcoin again, because I'm drawing parallels between stocks and crypto, just so you can understand what's going on. So if we really stretch out this chart, like really stretch it, you can kind of see that shape, right? That's being put in on the stock market, right? That kind of S shape that just has taken us back to support. But what's important here is not the 24-hour, but the CME chart, which still has that extremely high volatility. And while you do see this curve down, like sort of, you see this expansion when we were headed to the downside, and then you saw us kind of bending over backwards and coming back to our, our EMA here. That looks like it's just a temporary lull. You understand what I'm saying? And now we're starting to expand again. And follow me on this logic, okay? So let's go to a smaller time frame, and you can see that we put in that pump that I was talking about, right? We put in a little bit of a pump. And so what would that little bit of a pump correlate with? It would correlate with that little dip, right? That little dip to the downside. And so if we do continue to expand while we are headed, to the down direction, in price, then you could imagine that expanding all the way to the top of this volatility chart could end up, just taking us to a level down in terms of price. It doesn't have to do that. It is possible that we do, just flip bullish and come and get that CME gap that I've been talking about. But it seems pretty unlikely now. Again, we're under our daily 10. We're closing under there. We're actually, expanding to the downside. And our volatility has its entire range to expand. So you saw what happened right here when our volatility, you see this blue line right here, right? You see what happens when it expanded from here to the top of its channel? We went from around here, and as it expanded, we went all the way down here. So we could be on the precipice of another very significant move, perhaps that 15 to 25% move that I had been talking about using other metrics than what Eric Crown Crypto uses. But I did want to just mention that I learned about this method from Eric Crown Crypto, and I always like to give credit to people in the community. I don't like when people like just copy each other and pretend that they made it up on their own. So the other methods that I was showing you for how to derive that drop, of course, I was using a wide variety of indicators to back check, and the combination of them just affirmed that that move is quite possible. I'm not going to go over those again. I already went through those in a previous episode, and it would take quite a bit of time. However, the one thing that we can look at is, of course, the crossings that we have coming up on the Bitcoin chart. And for that, I will jump over to the 24-hour exchanges. And you can see that on the 3-day, we still have that negative crossing of the 20 and the 300 here. And we also have that 55 and the 200. They're rapidly approaching each other and going to cross bearishly. So we have two major bearish crossings on the 3-day. And I believe on the 4-day, on the 4-day we already printed the bearish crossing of this. It's actually the 21 that I use, the 21 and the 200. And you can see how we just dropped already on the 4-day, right? And of course, this crossing up here, the 55 and the 89, is what I use to predict this dramatic fall. And so again, I just wanted to point out that we have these crossings coming up. You can see also the 200 MA is also rapidly approaching the 20 MA. So we have this cross and this cross coming in sequence on the 4-day. And then on the 3-day, of course, I've been mentioning these ones and how the projected timeline is approximately when we're going to have the Federal Reserve meeting, right? So you can just kind of project outward there. When's it going to meet? And that's on the 15th, okay? So this 55 and 200 are going to cross over on the 15th, which is when the Federal Reserve will be making their decision. So could we have just a mega pump on the 15th because just randomly we have really good news and we pump and then we avoid this bearish crossing? I don't think so. I think we're going to get this bearish crossing. I think the Fed is going to just, kind of indicate that they have a lot more work to do. And so we're probably going to see this chart spill over, even though you can see we actually had a chance to put in some positive momentum that we've been building up as we've been creating this level here, right? So the longer we had been consolidating between, above this 10 EMA on the 3-day, the more likely it was that we could have had just an amazing pop through this 200, pardon me, the 300 EMA and just perhaps even reached our 200 EMA up here around 37,000-ish. But that seems to have broken down with the bad CPI data, the bad, inflation numbers, basically. And so we can no longer look forward to that. Sometimes the Fed does make politics, and if they are dead set on taking a break, and giving some relief to the stock market, then perhaps we could get some surprise good news. But that would be pure politics on behalf of the Fed. I don't even think the American government wants to do that. I think for example, the Biden administration, I think they want to get this pain over with. Elections are rapidly approaching. He's going to want this stuff solved within the next year and a half for sure, because then he's going to have to start rerunning for president. And if he hasn't fixed this issue in a year and a half, he's going to have hell to pay, right? Because then it's not the consequence of the economy before him. It's 100% his responsibility. It's the consequence of his actions, right? So, you can only get away with, mixing the economic data with your predecessor for the first, 2 years because, obviously the economy takes a long time to mess up. And so we had been messing up the economy for quite a long time. And, we'll see. We'll see how this pans out. The Fed, Jerome Powell, he really favors, his friends in the stock market, and he just hasn't been doing what needs to be done. And so there is that possibility of just a wild card where he says, we're just going to do it for 2 more months, increase for 2 more months, 50 basis points, and then we'll take a pause in September, and then everyone's going to get super excited. But short of that, I think people are really expecting 3 more increases of 50 basis points and potentially even 75 basis points or 100 basis points, a full point, because industry is getting tired of this. They're getting tired of waiting, and now 50 basis points isn't enough for industry. Industry originally didn't want anything. Of course, they didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to rock the money printing machine, right? But now that we're fully in it, they want to just rip the band-aid off. And I have no idea what these Federal Reserves in Europe, in the United States, around the world, all of the Federal Reserve, I have no idea what they're waiting for. They need to just increase interest rates, you know, slam the brakes on all of the overheating that's, wherever it is in the world. They just need to slam the brakes on it. While people still have their jobs, while we're still not in recessions everywhere in the world. Because the longer this goes on for, the more likely it is that we'll have a recession, and that it's going to be a recession that repairs inflation, which is never the ideal situation. A recession will almost always fix inflation, but that's not how you want to fix inflation, right? That's not good for politics. It's not good for people. It's kind of like war, right? Like nobody actually benefits from war except for very specific insiders and like in arms dealers and things like that. And what I'm suggesting is that Jerome Powell is kind of an arms dealer of economics, an economic arms dealer, right? And so he engineered this situation in the Trump administration when he was the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the Trump administration. He engineered this chaos back then, and for whatever reason, he's managed to hold on to his power, and he has the capacity to keep this pain going. And he also had the capacity to solve it a year ago. He had the capacity to solve it a year and a half ago, and he had the capacity to solve it 2 years ago. But it's been either willful ignorance or it's been intentional corruption that has led us to this place. And yeah, not much more to say about that. Just the drama continues with the global elitist, basically. Okay, so yeah, hard to see who's on your side these days in politics, no matter what your politics are. No matter what your politics are, whether you're on the right or you're on the left. Like we're talking about regular people. You know, these news channels and the talking heads and the politics guys, they've got you hating your neighbor. They've got you hating them for all sorts of things. And it's not your neighbor's fault, guys. It's not your neighbor's fault. All right. Both of the drivers of the politics of the political machine, they're turning you against each other, right? The same way that Biden is trying to turn you against you know corporations in terms of just demonizing them as profit taking and stuff like that. I mean, that's why corporations exist, to make profit, right? It's the politicians' jobs to write the rules, and then corporations follow the rules. They don't follow the rules, you put them in prison. And if you're not arresting them who are breaking the rules, then that's your fault, right? So either they're following the rules or you're not doing your job, right? Either, they're following the rules or you're not writing the proper rules, right? So we shouldn't demonize those companies. That's the politics is causing that to happen. And then on the right, you know, these days there's like a war on every little cultural item that you could think about, right? Think about anything that liberals like, and there's like haters like intentionally trying to hate on that. Like I hear people complaining about Netflix, about how woke it is, and yet I turn on any comedy special on Netflix and it's just continuously conservative jokes. Like it's fun. It's fun. It's entertaining. I like it. They're not woke. They're just like spitting out like all this crazy stuff, and it's not woke. It's just that they also have woke, they have woke episodes of certain series also. So they've got all of it. You know, I can't hate on that. Why are they trying to like make us hate everything in our own culture? I don't hate trans people. I don't hate gay people. I don't hate people who like guns for hunting. I don't hate people who like guns for just fun shooting at the shooting range, right? Why do they continuously try to make us hate each other? It's part of the distraction machine, right? Why how can we have a mob walk down to Congress and then invade Congress, our own country? We should be voting, we should be, believing in our system, and we should have specific steps on how to repair things. We shouldn't just become like angry mobs. How do we get to that point? Unless you know, these news stations and these politicians on both sides are riling us up, right? Because we see the mobs in the streets on the left, and we've seen it on the right. We've seen people be super sensitive. Oh, you can't say anything bad about Trump, or I'm gonna cry like a little snowflake. No, I'm gonna criticize Trump as much as I want. And you know what? Shut up and take it, Buttercup. You know, don't sugarcoat these things, right? We have to hear these things. The same thing with Biden, right? The man can't even walk straight. I have no idea if he's fully grasping like the seriousness of the situation with Russia and the economy. It looks like he's caught up now, but that first year sure did seem like he had no idea what was going on or the risk involved. So, you know, we have to get over this stuff and start really, paying attention these days because I guarantee you guys, I guarantee you, the next couple years can turn into a decade of hurt if we, the people, right? It doesn't matter which country you're in. I'm using obviously US centric concepts, but if you're in Europe or you're in Asia or you're in Canada or you're anywhere else in the world, this applies to you and your politicians as well, right? If you're in, Russia, Lord help you, you've got a mafia running your government, like a literal mafia, right? That'll break your legs and chop up your reporters and imprison politicians, right? Or poison them to death, right? If you're in China, you've got, leadership that will disappear you, right? Put you into a reconditioning camp, a communist reconditioning camp. Make sure your beliefs are on correctly, right? And the West is getting a little bit screwy, right? We're starting to, have these lockdowns and things, and people are okay with that. Like we need the right, like we need the progressive things so that we can make sure that we have, the things that we like as people. But we have to respect state boundaries. We have to respect communities that may have slightly different opinions than ours. The extreme woke needs to go. But at the same time, we can't have like this culture of, just demonizing everyone that has a liberal label or all that stuff. We have to start working together, right? We have to have, you know, we have to understand that there is value, of course, in, owning guns and things like that in order to protect our communities in case there ever is a kind of Russian-like figure or somebody who marches a mob down to, Congress and takes over Congress, right? Upends an election or something like that. Doesn't matter. It could happen on the left or on the right. We almost saw it happen on January 6th, right? Don't tell me like I don't care if that was planned or not planned. Don't tell me that a guy like Trump wouldn't have taken advantage of that, if it had happened, right? If Mike Pence had been strung up by an angry mob. Okay? Trump got rid of half the generals in the military before that happened. Just really rapidly just got rid of a whole bunch of heads of the military. That's suspicious, okay? But at the same time, he wasn't like sending out like huge waves of militias, and he wasn't like trying to bring like armed people. I think people can exaggerate the situation also. It's just he's an opportunist, and I think he saw the possibility that something was going to come, something was something was brewing, and he kind of saw it as an opportunity to perhaps take advantage of that. He's seen what Putin did. He's not somebody who would leave an opportunity on the table. He's going to grab that opportunity. And so, the question is, are we just hating each other so much that we're starting to leave these opportunities for potential authoritarians? And then, we saw Trump use the War Powers Act or whatever from World War II in order to basically take over and nationalize factories, which sounds something like straight out of like Stalin or like Russian communism, right? Like to take over factories in order to produce vaccines and to produce whatever the state wants to produce, right? Trump did that, and he set that precedent. And once he set that precedent, hey, guess what Joe Biden's doing? Like now he's doing it for like baby formula, right? Well, that baby formula shortage, like that got caused because, of course, like there was corruption on the corporations, which was the major one that produced the baby formula. And there's now a lot of documentation that shows that they were aware that kids could get poisoned and that their materials were contaminated. And this is why the FDA had to basically stop production there, because these people were so corrupt and so greedy and so just disgusting that they would be willing to kill babies, right? This imagine being a CEO and executives at a baby food manufacturing place, baby formula manufacturing company, and you're okay if babies are dying from your because you just don't want to spend extra money. You want to have a bigger bonus that year, and so you don't want to spend money on keeping your factory sanitary. And then babies die, and then your factory gets shut down, and then we have a supply issue. The whole world already has like supply chain issues. But what caused it to be worse is that when Trump renegotiated NAFTA, right, the North American Free Trade Agreement. I don't know what he renamed it to. Renamed it to something stupid. It's NAFTA, right? It's basically the exact same deal, just a little bit better. But there's some weird quirks, right, related to farm-based products like milk, right, and the powders that are needed for baby formula. And so at the time, everyone was saying, look, if you rewrite these rules, yeah, you can like favor American farmers slightly. See, this is anti-globalism, right? You can favor, this is protectionism. This is anti-free trade, anti-business. You can like favor the American worker. Okay. Okay, that's a little bit socialist, but okay, like you want to do that, Trump, fine. But they were warning, if you ever have a baby formula crisis, it's going to be either illegal to bring in like a baby formula. There's actual articles that were written at the time they were renegotiating NAFTA. Like it's going to be illegal to bring it in, or it's going to be so expensive that nobody can buy it. Nobody can bring it in. It's going to be just too expensive to bring it in. And they fully knew that could happen. There are all sorts of consequences when you stop free human activity and you have that kind of authoritarian, kind of nationalist, kind of selfish kind of mentality. There are all sorts of consequences that come out of that. And there's other problems with globalization and rapid globalization, right? Like you can lose entire industries to China, right? Like I don't think a Bush should ever have signed China into the World Trade Organization as our, most with the most favored nation trading status. That's absurd. It's insane. Like how why did Bush make China into our number one trading partner? It makes no sense. We are like literally dependent on the country that could be our number one rival. And so, look, I'm telling you guys, like whether it's the right or the left, like you guys have to stop demonizing each other. You have to start understanding there are problems on both sides. And, we need to clean our own houses as much as we need to clean up, the our opponents' houses, right? And it's much easier to clean your own house than your neighbors. So, Start with the people around you. And if they're just like trying to own the libs, or being hyper woke, you know, depending on which side you're on, you know, start having discussions with people like, you know what? Maybe that's not what we should be doing. Maybe we should actually be, focusing on stuff in our state. Maybe we should, you know, if you know somebody who's in business, maybe we should be bringing some of that business back to the US. Maybe we shouldn't be, supporting like all these companies that move to China and all that stuff. Maybe we should be telling our own legislatures, whether you're conservative or liberal, that, we don't want to have factories in China. And I'm not going to vote for you, if you have those type of policies. I don't want to have businesses in Russia. We've seen the consequence of this. We could have a world war. So, I don't know, guys. That's again, like I'm going on some of these rants just because it's really important in this day and age that we actually think about these things. Because look, if you're in crypto and you wanted to make a living this way, that's threatened now. Crypto is going to be, crypto is the first to go. It's the biggest risk on asset, right? It's the first one to take a big hit. And then if you're in stocks and you wanted to retire, you're also losing out. And it's not one guy. It's not Biden, it's not Trump, it's not Obama, it's not Bush, right? It's all of those guys. They did it together. And then 100 other countries did it. And then also the leaders of your states did it. And you know what they're focusing on? They're focusing on gays, and they're focusing on abortion, and they're focusing on just stupid things that honestly is none of your business primarily. Okay? It's not really your business. Take care of your own kids. You know, go to your school meetings and talk to them about what you want in your schools or not. If you don't like your school, take them somewhere else. File some complaints. Protest, the mayor and the city council, right? You don't have to just hate everybody else in the country or think that you need to overthrow the country. And you also don't need to suppress other people's freedoms of speech, right? Just because somebody doesn't think the same way as you about, sexuality or about guns or about whatever, you don't have to demonize those people, right? You can have a conversation like normal human beings. But I don't know what happened to men in this country, but I can't find real men anymore. I can only see, woke crybabies, and I can only see like these weirdly, snowflakey conservatives that just, I'm telling you guys, like like the men are gone, right? They can't have a decent conversation with each other anymore. They can't sit down and just talk about stuff. They're constantly trying to own each other and like doing these like laugh reacts as like self as deflections, right? It's just people aren't talking anymore. They're just trying to like hurt each other, and we need to get past that. That's what left us vulnerable to basically this attack on our economic system, which has been carried out by, frankly, elites who have been the primary beneficiary, right? These billionaires and elites, globalists, they're not tied to any country. If anything goes down in the US, they can just go to another country. They have no problem. You know, if your neighborhood has riots or something, they can just, if they're a neighbor, they can just move to a nicer neighborhood. Zero, it's just water off their back, It's water off a duck's back. Doesn't affect them at all. But guys, yeah, I'm seeing the possibility to be faked out on these charts. I think this market wants to crash further. I think we've got half a year of pain left to go. And people who keep saying like we're at the bottom, I don't know. I don't trust these guys. I don't see, I don't see these billionaires like wanting to buy stuff right now. I see them selling every time we have a relief rally. And you know what? That whole conversation about a pause in the Federal Reserve in September, I wouldn't be surprised if that was just a trick, just marketing in order to try to get retail, basically regular people, to buy stocks, to pump it up and so that they can dump on your head again. And, maybe it didn't work out because the inflation numbers were just too bad. But really, like, why were they even talking about a pause in September when we knew that the magnitude of the problem was so big? It's just because these billionaires and these global elitists, like they, who are just constantly doing business with China or Russia or Eastern Europe or wherever, these crazy countries in the world, right? That don't necessarily represent your values necessarily. I mean, you might be from there. Maybe it's a nice place. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, from an American perspective, it's not a great match. Okay, like we knew that during the Cold War, right? The legacy of World War II is not over yet, right? The legacy of the Cold War is not over yet. And in the meanwhile, like the West is starting to fracture. We're starting to show our cracks culturally. And that's why I'm also taking a lot of time to talk about maybe we should start listening to each other and not just reacting, along with everybody who gets mad at everything, right? If you're posting stuff like you mad and then like a laughy face as a response to like quote unquote owning somebody on the internet, no, no, no. You're the mad one. Like you're clearly disturbed or upset by something such that you got riled up into this weird way of behaving that's not manly. It's not, men don't do that. Okay, like men don't just go and invade stores and break down doors, and that victims do, right? If you're in a neighborhood where you either went kind of crazy from lockdowns and you tried to like take over like a gym or something like that. Or, if you are in a neighborhood which has had a lot of, violence and it's mentally disturbed you, and so you go and riot in your own neighborhood, these are two sides of the same coin. This is bad governance. It's not your neighbor's fault. It's bad governance. You've been let down by your leaders locally, right? You've been conditioned by certain television shows and certain talking heads who make a shit ton of money every year, millions of dollars, to have their radio channels or to have their news channels just to continuously keep you angry. And it's all smoke and mirrors while they have stolen the countries, I'm talking about the US, but this is happening in lots of places around the world, while they've stolen the national wealth and redistributed basically your money to their estates, right? So that's a little bit more abstract alpha for today, but I started with the charts because I know that it's important to watch out for these fake outs whenever we have these type of moves. Again, we have the CME here. which is pointed downwards, on the Stokes. It's not the strongest signal, but it's pointed downwards. And we also have, of course, that volatility. Well, actually, that Stokes is pretty strong right now. But we also have that volatility that can continue to expand. And as long as the Stokes is pointed in the downward direction, most likely this move is going to continue to carry out. Now, could there be accumulation by whales and just Bitcoin believers because there's insider information, right? But guys, have you seen that they're releasing these crypto legislation laws? I've talked about it a bit, but there's also talk that there could be a real Bitcoin ETF for the United States, and that those who want to like set up those ETFs are now threatening to sue, and that could have the real possibility of opening up a Bitcoin ETF. And I just want to point out that Bitcoin dominance has been just rising so quickly that if these insiders do know something about Bitcoin that we don't know, and that the Bitcoin ETF is on a path going forward, just very slowly, then I wouldn't give up necessarily on Bitcoin yet. And to be honest, I do think that we're entering into those ranges, which are good values. Obviously not financial advice, but that are good values to buy at. Anything under 30,000, basically, and anything between, 26,000 to, to 10,000. I mean, that's just a lovely range to DCA in anywhere. I wouldn't have recommended to DCA in above 30,000, but DCAing in under 30,000, you know, we're not going to be in these type of ranges forever. And even if we do have dips that last a year or whatever, that's probably the range that we'd end up in. So just think about it. It's not over. We're close to a bottom. The question is, how much further do we have to drop before we actually hit the very bottom? But you'll almost never catch the very bottom. And the fractal would suggest we could go all the way down to this kind of 9,000. I think we are in some serious trouble if we break 9,000. But yeah, each of these levels, if you correspond it with the stock market, is a pretty good value. And we're at one of those lower supports now. I would only say there's like 3 supports below that, 3 major supports, and then this is like Armageddon levels, right? So 3 support levels to DCA in if we do have even the hardest time, and then history does go forward. Like we do end up going forward, short of a nuclear war or something. Just think about it, right? Don't be over bearish at the bottom of the market. You can feel free to think about DCAing in. It's just I'm warning you that there is some risk of continuation to the downside, right? But again, like if insiders have some information, we'll never know. We'll never know if the Fed just comes out and makes politics and protects the stocks. We'll never know it in advance. We'll never know if just suddenly the SEC or some agency approves a Bitcoin ETF because they were being threatened with a lawsuit or something, and then suddenly somebody said, just do it, you know? And then later you find out they bought a shit ton of Bitcoin beforehand, right? So let's see. But yeah, to me it does look like we're just kind of checking back before we drop, and that the market is still waiting for the 15th. It's waiting for the 15th to decide. We're just in this holding pattern. We do have that kind of summer pattern being put on the charts, where it looks like, we could come back down to this kind of trend. All right, just a little further to drop. If it's worse than expected, then maybe we break under, kind of have a big deviation with a big volume spike, and then maybe we start to heal after that, right? Or we could just chop it out for half a year. Don't know. All right, guys, gonna leave it there. That's your alpha for the day. Stay safe and happy trading.